CEO challenges Black Janitor to a chess game, but her genius move silences the whole room. She was just the janitor until she sat down at the chessboard and crushed the CEO in front of a room full of executives. But what started as a humiliating game turned into a secret rivalry, an unexpected mentorship, and a story that would shake an entire city. Who is Naomi Brooks? And how did a woman the world tried to erase become the one who changed everything? You won't believe where this story goes. Tell us, where are you watching from? And if you love powerful stories that hit the heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. On the 57th floor of Eternum Capital's Glass and Steel Tower in downtown Chicago, the executive lounge glittered with wealth so dense it felt like it had weight. Crystal tumblers clinked against mahogany trays, laughter bloomed in sharp bursts, and a string quartet played something classical that no one was really listening to. Near the back, the company's founder and CEO, Gavin Ellis, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, bourbon in hand, spinning charm like thread from gold. "Come on," he said, his voice smooth and offhand, just loud enough to draw attention. "She's just the janitor. Let her play. We could use some entertainment." The chuckles that followed came easily. Too easily. Someone from strategy nudged their spouse. The head of legal lifted her eyebrows in amusement. Even the CFO cracked a grin behind a thin stem of champagne. All eyes turned to the corner where a slim woman in a dark maintenance uniform stood beside a wheeled cart of cleaning supplies. Her name tag, once probably white, had dulled into a soft gray smudge. Naomi Brooks didn't flinch. She had just started wiping down a brass railing when Gavin spoke, and now she stood frozen, her gloved hands clasped in front of her, her eyes calm and unreadable. There was no irritation on her face, no amusement either, just silence, like the kind of quiet you find before a storm. The chessboard sat in the center of the room, a sleek, decorative set carved from onyx and marble, more art piece than functional game. It had been Gavin's idea to display it tonight, a callback to his Princeton Chess Club days, meant to suggest strategic thinking without having to prove it. He turned now, waving a dramatic hand toward the empty chair across from his. "We've got a seat open for tonight's guest of honor." A few claps scattered through the room, half mocking, half curious. Naomi looked at him for a moment, just a moment, then walked forward. She didn't rush, didn't shuffle. She pushed the cart aside and approached the board like it was something she knew intimately. When she stopped, she studied the position with a glance that made a few of the partygoers shift in their leather chairs. "She knows how the pieces move, right?" someone whispered. Another replied with a giggle, "It's not checkers, sweetheart." Naomi sat. "I'll take black," she said, her voice even and low, like a bell that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Gavin blinked. "Black? Feeling bold, are we?" She didn't answer. She just reached out and reset the pieces with the kind of precision that can't be taught in adulthood. Her fingers moved like they remembered. Not a twitch of hesitation, not a flicker of performance, just muscle memory. The game began. Gavin opened confidently, slicing out a queen's gambit like a man stepping onto a familiar dance floor. He didn't waste time on small talk. His eyes stayed on the board, his posture relaxed, but Naomi didn't glance at him once. She responded like water meeting stone. Quiet, unshaken, calculated. 5 moves in, Gavin narrowed his eyes. 10 moves, and the room began to hush, as if the air had changed. 15 moves, and Naomi's rook slid across the board with lethal elegance. By move 19, Gavin's king was cornered. Checkmate. No one said anything. The quartet was still playing in the background, but the notes now felt disjointed, like they didn't belong in the same room as this silence. Naomi stood up. "Thank you for the game, Mr. Ellis," she said. She turned and walked back to her cart. Her shoes squeaked faintly on the polished floor. No applause, no gloating, just movement. And yet, something lingered in the air, stronger than victory, louder than mockery. Respect. Gavin didn't move. He sat there, staring at the board, not touching the bourbon at his side. All he could hear was the faint hum of ventilation and the whisper of Naomi's footsteps disappearing behind the elevator doors. Later, when the lounge cleared out and the last bottle had been tucked away, a junior associate hesitantly approached him. "Should I pack the board up, sir?" Gavin didn't respond. He stood slowly and walked away without saying a word. He didn't sleep that night. Back in his penthouse, a cathedral of minimalism and curated taste, he paced across polished concrete floors with the restless energy of a man whose certainty had been fractured. At 2:00 a.m., he sat at his kitchen counter, the city below casting amber light through the glass walls. He opened his laptop and typed, "Naomi Brooks, chess." Dozens of results came up. None of them her. No LinkedIn, no blog, no YouTube videos, no viral clips of janitors beating CEOs. Just other Naomi Brookses, schoolteachers, realtors, a singer in Baton Rouge. He dug deeper. By 3:15 a.m., he was buried in the archives of the U.S. Chess Federation. He scanned page after page of junior tournaments, scrolling through years of records from the Midwest. Still nothing. He paused on a grainy black-and-white photo from a 2007 Detroit Youth Invitational. A girl on the edge of the frame. Tilted head. Quiet eyes, a single braid tucked behind her ear. Beneath the image, faded ink. Naomi J. It had to be her. Gavin closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair, and rubbed his temples. What the hell was he even doing? This wasn't about revenge, not really. It wasn't even about ego. It felt like he'd just been seen. Not just outplayed, unraveled. He'd built his empire on control, over markets, narratives, people. But tonight, in less than 30 minutes, a woman the world had overlooked had peeled away the outer layer of his arrogance and exposed the hollowness beneath. And she hadn't even blinked. The next morning, Gavin skipped 2 investor calls and walked into Aeternum Capital at 9:45 a.m., wearing the same black shirt from the night before. His assistant did a double take. "Everything okay, Mr. Ellis?" "Light schedule today," he muttered. Then he did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He took the service elevator. The hallway on the facilities level smelled like bleach and dried paint. A security guard looked startled when Gavin stepped out. Maintenance staff froze mid-movement. A janitor pushing a mop bucket paused like he wasn't sure if this was a test. Gavin didn't care. He scanned the small office near the back where a clipboard hung beside a microwave. Naomi Brooks, off duty, 2 days. No phone number, no emergency contact, no address. Back in his office, Gavin opened the internal employee directory. All he could find was a badge ID and a schedule. He thought about calling HR, then decided against it. They'd twist it into something it wasn't. A complaint, a power imbalance, a PR issue. Instead, he waited. 2 days passed. On the 3rd night, Gavin stayed late. He told his assistant he needed quiet to review expansion plans. At 10:30 p.m., he set up the chessboard in the executive lounge again, this time with White facing his side. By 11:43, he heard it, the soft squeak of rubber wheels on polished tile. Naomi pushed the cart through the lounge door. She didn't flinch when she saw him. Their eyes met. Hers were still as unreadable as they had been 3 nights ago, like glass over deep water. He stood. "I didn't mean to humiliate you." "You didn't," she said, pulling gloves on. "You asked for a game. I gave you one." "You're good." "Used to be." He nodded, walking slowly to the board. "Where'd you learn?" She sprayed cleaner on a table without looking at him. "My dad taught me. He played in the park with other men who worked shifts at the mill. I used to sit on the bench and watch. Tournaments? Stopped before high school." "Why?" She looked up. "Because hospitals don't run on dreams, and little brothers don't feed themselves." He didn't know what to say. She turned back to her cart. "Play again," he said. "Not for show, just for me." Naomi hesitated. Then, without a word, she walked to the board and pulled the black pieces toward her. "If you open with that smug little Scandinavian line again," she murmured, "I'm flipping the board." Gavin chuckled, more surprised by his own smile than anything else. Duly noted. They played. This time, Naomi didn't aim to crush. She danced. She measured. She made him work. By move 34, it was a draw. She stood. "I should mop before the wax sets." "You're the most disciplined player I've ever faced." "Discipline's easy when the rest of your life is chaos." She pushed the cart toward the door. "Maya." She stopped. "I'd like to play again." She nodded once, without turning. "Then leave the board set." And she was gone. But this time, Gavin wasn't left humiliated. He was left intrigued and humbled. Gavin didn't return to the executive lounge the next night, or the one after that. Instead, he stayed home, sitting in the cold hum of his penthouse's vast living room, the city glittering beneath him like a giant chessboard. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Naomi Brooks. Not just the way she played, but the way she existed in silence, unbothered, precise, entirely unmoved by the weight of the room or the eyes on her. She hadn't needed applause. She hadn't even wanted it. She'd dismantled him like she was brushing lint off a coat, and somehow that cut deeper than any flashy defeat. By the third night, he found himself back at the kitchen counter again, his laptop open and glowing in the dark. He typed her name into the search bar for the 6th time that week. Naomi Brooks. Nothing. There were LinkedIn pages, of course, a real estate agent in Phoenix, a nutritionist in Boston, a musician in Atlanta. None of them had her face, sharp features, calm eyes, a braid tucked neatly behind her ear. He tried narrowing it down. Naomi Brooks Chess. Again, the same flood of irrelevant names, old forum posts, and tournament winners that weren't her. It didn't make sense. No one played like that without training, without years. He adjusted his search parameters, tried archives, junior leagues, anything regional. His fingers moved faster than his thoughts, driven by some silent obsession he didn't fully understand. She wasn't famous. She wasn't on YouTube. No viral clips, no interviews. It was as if someone had taken an eraser to her digital presence. At 2:37 a.m., buried deep in the U.S. Chess Federation's outdated digital archives, he found a local Detroit tournament listing from 2007, Motor City Youth Classic. Most of the finalists' names were forgettable, but one photo made him freeze. A girl, maybe 13, stood at the far end of the winner's podium, not on it, just near it, arms crossed, face unreadable. The others were smiling, holding medals, all energy and pride. But her, she was still, like a statue, as if she'd already seen what the world would do with her brilliance and had decided not to give it away for free. Her name was listed simply, Naomi J. His chest tightened. That was her. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. Same eyes, same silence, same lack of performance. But there was nothing else. No scores, no rankings, no records of wins or losses. It was the only tournament she ever appeared in, as far as the archives were concerned. It was like she'd appeared, briefly, then vanished. He leaned back, ran both hands down his face, and exhaled hard. What the hell was he chasing? This wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't curiosity. It felt personal. Too personal. But it wasn't about saving her, he reminded himself. She didn't need saving. He was the one unraveling. Naomi hadn't just beaten him. She'd exposed him. Every fake smile, every performance, every decision made for optics instead of conviction. When she looked at him across that board, she hadn't seen a titan of industry. She'd seen a man too used to winning rooms and too unfamiliar with losing on terms he couldn't control. And it made him want to change something. He didn't know what, just something. The next morning, he skipped his driver and took his own car. No schedule. No calendar invites. He walked into the building through the side entrance used by deliveries and staff. The security guard gave him a confused nod, and Gavin offered nothing back. He went straight to the janitorial office in the basement. The clipboard was still there. Naomi Brooks, off duty, 2 days. No emergency contact, no personal number, no employee profile beyond shift hours and badge ID. He stared at her name, printed in plain ink, and felt something sharp rise in his throat. Guilt? Shame? A strange cocktail of the two. He returned upstairs, closed his door, and sat for a long time staring at his untouched desk. Calls came in. He ignored them. A knock from his assistant. He waved her off. He opened a notepad and stared at a blank page, unsure what he intended to write. Finally, with some hesitation, he scrawled 4 words. "What is she hiding?" Then crossed it out. "What have we missed?" That felt closer to the truth. That night, he waited. Same chair, same setup. This time, he didn't even pretend to work. He just sat with the chessboard in front of him, white facing him, the pieces reset exactly as they'd been the last time they played. At 11:42 p.m., he heard it. The low hum of the service elevator, the soft rubber wheels on marble. She entered the lounge without a word. Her uniform looked freshly laundered. Her braid was tighter tonight. The gloves stayed in her pocket, and though her hands were empty, she carried the same quiet power. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You're early," she said. "I've been here a while," he admitted. Naomi stepped closer, eyes flicking to the board. "Trying to memorize my strategy?" "Trying to understand it." She gave him a sideways glance. "Don't waste your time. You don't play like me." "I noticed." She began wiping down the glass conference table. The air between them held the weight of unfinished questions. He stood. "Why did you stop playing?" She paused. The rag in her hand hovered above the surface. "I told you," she said softly. "Life. Lots of people have hard lives." She turned then, slowly. "Lots of people have safety nets, too." He didn't respond. Naomi went back to cleaning. He tried again. "You were gifted." "I was prepared. That's not the same." "I don't understand." "That's because you've never had to." She walked toward the board and adjusted the knight that had tilted slightly. "I played when I could, in parks, in libraries, against men who called me sweetheart and tried to distract me with bad jokes." "Why didn't you compete again?" She stared at the board. "My mother got sick. My brother was 8. I cleaned houses to keep the lights on. Tournaments didn't pay bills." Gavin nodded slowly, absorbing that. "Why this job, then?" he asked, quieter now. "Why now?" "Because it's honest. Because it gives me space to think. Because it's mine." "And the game?" She looked up. "I didn't stop playing. I just stopped letting people watch." They stood in silence, then he gestured toward the board. "One more?" Naomi stared at him for a long beat. Then, without a word, she pulled out the black pieces and began to set them. "If you open with the King's Indian again," she warned, "I'm flipping the table." He smiled. "Noted." They played. It was slower this time, less competitive, like 2 people talking through movements. He learned she was surgical with defense, brutal in her counters, and impossibly patient. She never rushed, never second-guessed. By move 31, it was a draw. "I should mop before the wax sets," she said again, like a ritual. As she stood, Gavin said, "You're the most precise player I've ever sat across." She shrugged, picking up her cloth. "Precision is easy when the rest of your life is chaos." "Play again tomorrow?" She paused. "I'm not here to entertain you, Mr. Ellis." "I'm not here for that. I just want to keep learning." Naomi tilted her head as if examining a puzzle. Then she nodded. "Leave the board set." She walked out. He didn't move. And he didn't realize until she was gone that for the first time in years he wasn't planning his next win. He was chasing something else. Something deeper. And for once he wasn't sure if he was the player or the piece. It became a rhythm, quiet and unspoken. Every night, Gavin stayed late. Naomi appeared around the same time, and the board sat waiting between them like a bridge neither of them admitted they were building. There were no greetings, no explanations, just the shuffle of cleaning supplies, the steady clink of chess pieces, and the hush of fluorescent lights overhead. The lounge, once a place of curated power, became their secret arena, a space outside the hierarchy, outside noise. They never played for show again. The first night back, she took black. He tried a Catalan opening, curious to see how she'd handle it. She responded with patient, probing moves, letting him extend until he was overexposed. The match ended in a draw. He almost smiled. The second night, she asked, "What's your endgame?" He looked up. "In chess or in life?" "Both." "In chess? Still figuring that out. In life? Maybe the same." She gave a soft, dry laugh and castled without looking at him. By the end of the week, Gavin stopped trying to win outright. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he always wanted to win, but there was something different about playing her. Naomi didn't aim to dominate. She chipped away at your ego, not your queen. Her tactics weren't flamboyant, but they were lethal in their subtlety. And she played like someone who had nothing to prove anymore, just something to remember. One night she arrived wearing a gray hoodie under her uniform. Her braid was undone, curls pinned up messily. He asked if she'd had a hard day. She shrugged. "The world's always hard. I just got tired earlier today." Then she took the board and, in 27 moves, surgically dismantled his entire strategy. He stayed behind after she left, staring at the final position. Rook to f7. Checkmate. He realized he hadn't even seen it coming. She'd turned him into the amateur. The next night, he asked, "Did you ever think about going back? Tournaments, I mean?" She was resetting the board. "No." "Why not?" "No time, no money, no safety net." He watched her. "You could still do it." She looked up. "Why?" "Because you're better than most of the people getting trophies for it." Naomi's hand stilled on a bishop. Her eyes didn't waver. "That's never been enough." Gavin leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "It should be." "It's not." She slid the bishop into place and started the game. "You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and be underestimated before you even speak." "I do, actually," he said. "Just not for the same reasons." "Exactly." They played in silence. A week passed, then 2. Some nights Naomi came in and simply nodded at him before returning to her tasks. No game, no conversation, just quiet acknowledgement. On those nights, he didn't press, he didn't interrupt. He sat at the edge of the room, reviewing reports or pretending to, sipping cheap bourbon from the office bar cart and watching her clean like she was choreographing something he didn't understand yet. There was a grace in it, a kind of peace. And that's what began to haunt him, not just how good she was at chess, but how much better she was at silence. He wasn't used to that. Gavin Ellis filled rooms, without charm, with vision, with control. But Naomi could clear one with a look, and she never asked for anything. Not space, not permission, not even acknowledgement. She simply was. One night, just as he was about to suggest a rematch, she asked, "Why are you really here, Gavin?" He blinked. She rarely used his first name. "What do you mean?" "You're not staying late because you love working in the dark." He hesitated. "You want the honest answer?" Naomi gave a faint nod, though her eyes were on the board. "Because when I play with you, I feel honest. For the first time in years, I'm not trying to close a deal or win a narrative, I'm just thinking." She didn't reply right away. Then, "You're lucky, you know." He frowned. "How so?" "You get to be seen. Even when you're wrong, people listen." Gavin looked down at the board. "I never thought of that as luck." "Most people don't." The room fell into silence again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt shared. That weekend, he did something he hadn't done since his college years. He went to a chess club. It was a dusty, half-forgotten space on the south side, tucked behind a used bookstore. Old men hunched over battered boards, muttering about missed opportunities. Teenagers stared at phone timers while trying to memorize openings. The room smelled like coffee, chalk, and nostalgia. He watched for a while, then joined a match. He lost, then played again, and again. He didn't tell anyone who he was. No one recognized him. That anonymity. It felt like breathing for the first time. He realized then, Naomi hadn't just been invisible because of her job. She'd been erased by the way the world expected her to stay quiet, stay small. By Monday, he'd made a decision. That night, after their match, another narrow draw, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Naomi looked at it suspiciously. "What's that?" He slid it across the table. "Registration form. Chicago Women's Open. Happens in 2 months." She didn't touch it. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. "Because you belong there." Naomi's expression didn't change. "I'm 31. I work nights. I haven't trained in over a decade." "You train every time we play." "That's not the same." "It is, if you want it to be." Naomi stared at the paper for a long time, but didn't pick it up. "If I say no," she asked, "then I'll withdraw too." "You already registered me?" He nodded. "Just initials, no press, no Verity connections." Her jaw tensed. "I don't want to be your charity project, Gavin." "You're not." "Then what am I?" He leaned forward. "My teacher." That silenced her more than any compliment could have. After a long pause, she said, "If I agree, we train on equal terms. No private coaches, no luxury setups. You play where I play." He nodded. "And if I win," she added, "you stop trying to make me into your project." "And if I win?" he asked. Naomi folded the registration form and tucked it into her back pocket. "Then maybe you'll finally understand why winning's never been the point." That night he returned to his office and did something small but deliberate. He replaced the polished crystal chess set in the lounge with an old scratched wooden one he ordered from a community center supply store. When Naomi entered the room the next night and saw the change, she paused. "No more ivory and marble? I figured I should play on your terms." She studied him for a moment, then sat. From that point on, the tone shifted. They weren't rivals anymore. They were students of each other, and the game became less about who would win and more about what could be discovered between each move. Each match felt like a conversation, told in sacrifice and position. She taught him how to defend against chaos. He taught her how to anticipate structure. She played with instinct. He played with logic. And slowly, their styles began to blend. One morning, before dawn, in a quiet cafe with cracked leather booths and burnt coffee, Naomi trapped Gavin's queen in 12 moves. He stared at the board, slack-jawed. "You're reading my thoughts." "No," she said. "I'm reading your habits." He glanced at her. "That's worse." "You don't know how to be uncomfortable," she added, setting up the next game. "That's your biggest weakness." "I grew up uncomfortable." "No," she said, not unkindly. "You grew up insulated. There's a difference." Gavin didn't reply, but something in him shifted, and he wondered, maybe for the first time in his life, if being broken open was the only way to really learn. It started with whispers. Barely noticeable at first, passing comments in the hallway, lingering glances in the elevator, a raised eyebrow here, a stifled laugh there, but by the end of the second week, the change was impossible to ignore. Naomi felt it pressing against her like static in the air, subtle but sharp. She wasn't invisible anymore, and that terrified her. She'd spent years mastering the art of silence, of going unnoticed. She moved through spaces like breath, present, vital, but never acknowledged. Now, people were looking. Not because they saw her, but because they were beginning to see something they didn't understand. The night matches with Gavin had become sacred, a ritual, a shared language, a tether in a world that always wanted her out of frame. But the moment people noticed, the board stopped being neutral ground. It became evidence. The first sign was an awkward pause in the break room. She entered to refill a bucket, and two marketing interns stopped mid-conversation, their eyes darting toward the floor. One offered a quick, fake smile before fleeing. The other pretended to read an upside-down calendar. Then came the cleaning schedule. Change? No explanation, just a quiet reassignment. Naomi was now scheduled to clean different floors on different nights, no longer consistently assigned to the executive lounge. She switched the papers back. No one said anything. The note arrived a few days later, folded, unmarked, slipped into her locker. 3 words in block print. Know your place. Naomi stared at the paper for a long time. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't change. She crumpled it with slow, deliberate fingers and dropped it into the trash without a sound. Not out of fear, out of something deeper. Rage. The kind that simmers quietly and waits. That night, she arrived at the lounge 20 minutes early. Gavin was already there, resetting the board like always. He looked up, surprised to see her ahead of schedule, but said nothing. He'd learned when to speak and when to wait. Naomi didn't sit. She hovered near the window, staring at the city lights flickering against the glass. "They're watching," she said finally. "I know. They think I'm using you. They think I'm using you," he replied. She turned to face him, expression unreadable. "You're not the one they'll write up, or reassign, or erase." Gavin's jaw tensed. "I can talk to HR." "Don't. I can fix." "You can't fix what was never designed to be fair." Her voice was steady, not accusatory. "Just tired. They don't care that I earned it. They just care that I'm out of place." "You're not. To them I am." She stepped closer to the board but didn't sit. "You get to be misunderstood and still get a promotion. I get misunderstood and suddenly I'm some kind of scandal. You're not a scandal. I'm a story. That's worse." Gavin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you want me to stop coming?" "That's not the point." "Then what is?" Naomi hesitated. Her eyes dropped to the board. "I don't want to be the reason they stop listening to you. You're the reason I started listening." For the first time in weeks, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, her face a battlefield of pride and vulnerability. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The next night, she found a note under the chessboard. "I'll stay out of sight for a while, but I'm still playing, if you are too. 1 move a knight, always yours to answer. G." And there it was, a single move on the board. His white pawn pushed to E4. Naomi stood in the center of the empty room and stared at the pieces. Then she stepped forward, slid the black pawn to C5, and left. The next knight, E4, answered by E5. Then, knight to F3, bishop to C4, castle kingside. Always one move, always waiting. No notes from her, just replies. The board spoke for them. It was strange, intimate even. A silent conversation across time and space, with no audience and no performance. Just strategy, just thought, just presence. But outside that sacred rhythm, the pressure was rising. 3 days later, Naomi was called into HR. The room was sterile, all glass edges and beige carpet. The woman behind the desk wore a pastel blazer and a smile too tight to be real. "We just want to ensure everything remains professional," she began. Naomi didn't sit. She folded her arms across her chest and stared at the woman evenly. "There have been questions," the woman continued. "Concerns about your after-hours interactions with Mr. Ellis. We play chess." The woman blinked. "Excuse me." Naomi's voice didn't waver. "After hours. On our own time. No money, no deals. Just games. You must understand how this appears. I understand appearances are a luxury afforded to people with titles." The woman shifted uncomfortably. Naomi tilted her head. "Am I being disciplined?" "No, of course not." "Then I have work to do." She turned and walked out. No one stopped her. That night, she considered skipping her floor. Let someone else polish the brass. Let someone else step into that room with its silent board and empty seat. But something pulled her back. The move on the board was a queen sacrifice. Risky, bold, reckless. Naomi stared at it, blinking once. Then she smiled. So he was paying attention. She countered with a night shift, pinning his remaining rook. Then she left her own note, tucked just beneath the corner of the board. Nice try, but your diagonal was exposed 3 moves ago. N. The next morning, Gavin walked into his boardroom and faced 12 suits expecting quarterly charts. He handed them a single sheet of paper titled Southside Chess and STEM Youth Initiative, Pilot Proposal. One board member scoffed. You want to allocate funding to chess? Gavin didn't blink. We've failed this part of the city before. It's time we did something real. And the optics? Another asked, eyes narrowing. Given the rumors? The optics, Gavin said calmly, are that we're a company who doesn't just talk about innovation. We invest in it. And talent doesn't always wear a suit. The vote passed, barely. 3 days later, Naomi was finishing a tactics drill with a group of squirmy third graders at a local rec center when a woman in a green suit approached her with a clipboard and a warm smile. I'm with the Eternum Foundation, she said gently. We'd like to fund your Saturday program. Boards, transportation, materials, no strings, anonymous donors. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Does this have anything to do with the man who always plays white? The woman didn't answer. She didn't need to. That evening, Naomi entered the executive lounge earlier than usual. Gavin was already there, standing, not sitting, his hands clasped behind his back like a schoolboy awaiting judgment. Naomi didn't speak. She approached the board, moved a pawn, and sat. So, you're starting this time? He asked. I figure I've been letting you lead long enough, he smirked. I had nothing to do with the donation, he said after a beat. Of course not. I didn't want to insult your pride. It's not pride, she replied, eyes fixed on the board. It's proof that people like me can get somewhere without being rescued. Gavin nodded. Then let me offer a trade. She glanced at him. You train for the Open. I match you, game for game, 5 mornings a week, no press, no perks, just the board. She studied him. You trying to get better? I'm trying to keep up. Naomi moved her bishop forward, eyes still locked on his. Then stop talking and start playing. And just like that, the game resumed. Not with tension, not with fear, but with trust. Tentative, earned. Like 2 people finding their way back to the board and maybe to each other. The first time Gavin arrived at the Southside Rec Center, he came without a driver, without a suit, without an itinerary. It was just after 4:30 p.m. on a gray Wednesday, the kind of afternoon where the sky looked like unbrushed steel. He drove himself, windows down, music off. The car, a sleek black sedan usually reserved for client pickups, looked entirely out of place among the uneven curbs and flickering street lamps of the neighborhood. This was the part of the city Eternum Capital had promised once upon a time to help revitalize. Community initiatives, they called it. A mural here, a library donation there, but nothing stuck. The streets remained cracked, the windows boarded, the promises paper-thin. Still, something about this place pulled at him. He remembered Naomi's voice when she said, "You don't know what it's like to walk into a room and be invisible." Now, walking through the rust-stained doors of the old rec center, he realized he hadn't known, but he was starting to. The interior smelled like sweat, floor wax, and the ghosts of too many failed grants. Folding tables were arranged in uneven rows, each with mismatched chessboards and worn-out plastic pieces. A battered boombox hummed low jazz in the corner, competing with the occasional burst of laughter from a group of kids no older than 10. And there she was. Naomi knelt beside a boy with missing front teeth, explaining how to avoid a back-rank mate with a clarity that didn't just teach, it revealed. She moved a pawn, looked up and said, "See that?" It's not about being flashy. It's about seeing the trap before it's even built." The boy blinked, then grinned wide. "Like a ninja?" "Exactly," Naomi said, smiling back. She hadn't seen Gavin yet. For a few long seconds he just stood there, leaning against a crooked support beam, watching her in her element. Not defending, not surviving, just being. He wasn't sure what he'd come to say, or even if he had the right to be there. When the session wrapped and the kids dispersed in a blur of sneakers and backpacks, Naomi finally noticed him. Her smile faded into something more cautious. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You followed me." "I asked around. They said you volunteer here every week." She raised an eyebrow. "You stalk all your chess opponents?" "Only the ones who make me rethink everything I know about strategy." She didn't smile. "So, why are you here, really?" Gavin hesitated. "Because I don't think this—" He gestured around the dim gymnasium. "Should be the only place people see you play." "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't show up with offers dressed like favors. I don't need your name on a banner or your logo on a t-shirt." "I'm not offering a logo," he said gently. "I'm offering a match." From his coat, he pulled out a folded flyer, the official announcement for the upcoming Chicago Open Chess Tournament. Naomi didn't take it. She read it from where she stood, arms crossed. "I'm not competing." "You should." "I'm 31. "Exactly. You know who you are now." "I work nights." "I'll match your hours." "I haven't trained in over a decade." "You train every time we play." She shook her head. "That's not the same." "Then make it the same." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "Did you already register me?" "Yes, just your initials. No eternum ties, no press." "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" He smiled. "I'm a CEO. Stubbornness is half the job." After another pause, she reached for the flyer and tucked it into her bag. "I'll consider it, but we train on my terms. No suits, no strategy teams, no luxury setups." "I wouldn't dream of it." "And if I win," she added, "you stop treating me like some unsolvable puzzle." "And if I win?" Naomi zipped her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and gave him a look. "Then you'll finally understand why it's never been about winning." That night, back at Eternum, Gavin made a change. He removed the luxury board from the executive lounge, the one with carved ivory pieces and a base of polished crystal, and replaced it with a scratched, travel-worn set he ordered from a community center vendor. He even picked up a timer clock, the kind Naomi had used back at the rec center, with faded stickers on the side and a crack in the plastic. When she arrived just before midnight and saw the change, she paused in the doorway. "No more crystal and ivory?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "I figured I should start playing on your terms." She nodded, sat, and began setting up the board without another word. Somewhere between the first pawn move and the 35th, Gavin realized the matches weren't about dominance anymore. They were a conversation, a quiet unraveling, a rebalancing of something much larger than the board. And Naomi, she wasn't a mystery now. She was a mirror. She reflected everything success had dulled in him. The hunger, the risk, the unflinching focus. It changed him. Of course, people noticed. "Have you seen how late Ellis stays now?" Someone from finance whispered near the espresso machine. "He's mentoring a staffer or something." "A janitor," another corrected, with a tone halfway between judgment and awe. "Seriously? For chess?" The rumors spread like coffee stains on linen. Naomi felt it first, in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, in the silence that followed her into the elevator, in the sudden oversight of her shift hours and the way managers began logging her movement. It wasn't surprise, it was suspicion, not because she wasn't good, but because she wasn't supposed to be. One night, after a tight, thoughtful draw, she packed her things quickly. "You're in a hurry," Gavin noted, placing his king back into its slot. "I've got other floors to mop," she replied, not looking up. "You're upset." "No," she lied. "Naomi, I don't need a babysitter, Gavin," she snapped, meeting his gaze. Whatever this is between us, it's starting to look like a favor, and I've lived too long proving I'm not someone's project." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. She stood. "You may be used to being misunderstood and still getting promoted. I don't get that luxury. One misstep, and I'm working an angle. One more rumor, and I'm a liability." He said nothing. She turned to leave. "This tournament, if I go, it has to be about the game. Not optics, not image, just truth." He nodded. The next morning, she found another note under the board. "I'll keep my distance, but I'll keep playing. One move a night. Just us, always. G." And so they did. No words, no matches side by side, just a single move each night. She'd enter the lounge to find a rook shifted, a knight advanced, a pawn sacrificed. She answered silently, with counters that spoke more clearly than any speech. They didn't need to talk. The board became their voice. Meanwhile, the world around them turned sharper. The HR department called her in again. This time it wasn't curiosity, it was caution. "We just want to ensure boundaries are respected," the HR rep said with a mechanical smile. "I play chess, after hours, on my break, with the CEO. No rules say I can't. You must understand appearances." Naomi cut her off. "I understand appearances. I also understand when I'm being cornered without being touched." The rep stiffened. "This isn't disciplinary." "Good," Naomi said, "because I have work to do." She walked out with her back straight and her fists clenched. That night, Gavin left a queen exposed, intentionally. Naomi stared at it for a full minute, then left a note beneath her response. "Nice try, but I saw your opening 4 moves ago." N, she was done hiding, even if the world wasn't ready to see her. And Gavin, now more than ever, knew she wasn't his opponent anymore. She was the only one who'd ever challenged him to become more than just a man playing a game. She was the game changer, and maybe, just maybe, the one who'd finally teach him how to lose the right way. The tournament hall was colder than Naomi expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The air felt thick with calculation, measured glances, and quiet judgment. It was held in a repurposed hotel ballroom downtown, lined with long rows of folding tables dressed in white linens, regulation chessboards, plastic clocks, and scorebooks waiting to be filled. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, throwing a flat, unforgiving glow on everything. The floor still smelled of stale carpet glue and disinfectant. Her badge hung around her neck like a challenge. Brooks, N. She clutched it as she stepped in, the strap tight against her collarbone. She wasn't dressed to impress. Navy blouse, slacks, sneakers polished to a near shine, but she moved with an assurance that felt new. Around her, opponents and spectators clustered in small knots. Some wore blazers with Federation pins. Others, hoodies with Grandmaster logos. Teenagers hunched over phones, reviewing openings. Older men muttered about pairing strategies. She didn't belong here, and yet, she did. At the far end of the room, Gavin Ellis appeared, not in a suit, but in jeans and a hoodie. His face was calm, unreadable, but when their eyes met across the sea of tables, he gave her a quiet nod. She nodded back. That was enough. Her first opponent was a middle-seated club player from Evanston. Mid-40s, friendly smile, quick handshake. "Brave of you," he said as they sat, "to enter a circuit like this." Naomi didn't respond. She just reset the board. 27 moves later, he was outmaneuvered and visibly stunned. He didn't smile at the end. Her second game was tighter, a young woman with slicked back hair and nerves that showed in her tapping fingers. She played aggressive, throwing her queen into the center early and trying to force the tempo. Naomi let her, slowed the game down, unraveled the attack, and delivered the final blow with 10 seconds left on her opponent's clock. By the end of day 1, Naomi was undefeated, but so were the whispers. She heard them near the refreshment tables, behind restroom doors, floating in the corners between matches. "Is that the janitor from Eternum? She's not really self-made. I heard Ellis trained her. They're spinning it into some Cinderella thing." Naomi kept walking. She'd survived worse. She'd scrubbed toilets after midnight and balanced rent with groceries. But now the world wasn't trying to erase her, it was trying to rewrite her. That, somehow, felt crueler. Gavin had his own battles. He played methodically, cleanly. Not for fame, not for advancement, but for clarity. He didn't smile when he won. He didn't sulk when he drew. He focused. He listened. To the board, to the rhythm, to the lessons Naomi had planted in his muscle memory over the last 2 months. When their names both appeared on the semi-final bracket, tables side by side, Naomi stared at the list with no expression. She didn't need to show pride, just purpose. The third round, however, shook her. Her opponent was a man she vaguely recognized. Tall, pale, tailored charcoal suit that looked custom-made, slicked back hair, the kind of man who walked into boardrooms and expected every eye to turn. He shook her hand with a calculated grip. "Ready, Miss Brooks?" She met his eyes. "I've been ready." The clock started. He opened with the Nimzo Indian defense, controlled, cautious. Naomi didn't blink. She played fast in the beginning, not reckless, measured. She gave up her bishop early, baiting him into a space he thought he controlled. He took it, smiled. She let him, then flipped the tempo. She didn't aim to humiliate. She aimed to breathe. 43 moves in, his rook was cornered. His king flanked. He tipped it. The murmur around the room was almost louder than the applause. From her periphery, Naomi saw Gavin lose his own match. A brutal, endgame error against a Latvian master. But when he looked over at her, he smiled wide, wider than she'd ever seen him. He clapped. Once, twice, loud and deliberate. Others followed. Reporters moved in. Officials handed her a crystal plaque. Cameras flashed, but none of it mattered. She looked at him again, and he mouthed like a stranger. That night, the award banquet felt like a trap. Too many suits, too many speeches, too many hands reaching to take credit for what they never dared invest in. Naomi stood near the edge of the ballroom, untouched ginger ale in hand, trophy sitting beside a plate of cheeses she hadn't eaten. She scanned the room and saw him, Gavin, surrounded by board members and donors, all politely circling like moths. When he finally broke free and found her, she didn't smile. "You okay?" he asked. "I've never been in a room with this much lobster and this many fake smiles." He chuckled. "You won, Naomi. You changed the board." She let out a breath. "Then why do I feel like I'm just a different kind of pawn?" Before he could respond, the governor of Illinois stepped up, hand extended, grin wide. "Miss Brooks, your story has moved this entire state. We'd love to partner with you, create an educational initiative, a tour." Naomi stared at him. "You mean, put me on a bus so I can talk to classrooms about how I got lucky?" He faltered. "Well, I wouldn't say lucky. You're exceptional." "I was always exceptional," she said calmly. "You just never noticed until now." He excused himself with an awkward smile. Gavin raised an eyebrow. "Did you have to scorch him like that?" "I didn't scorch him. I lit the truth and let it sit there." She turned toward him. "I want to leave." He nodded. "Yeah, let's walk." They slipped out the service exit into the cold Chicago night. The city air hit her like clarity. Sharp, honest, unfiltered. They walked for blocks in silence, turning onto a pedestrian path by the river where old fairy lights still flickered along the railing. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." They paused at the edge of the path, staring out at the water. "I used to walk here," Naomi said, "after janitor shifts, before sunrise, just to remember I existed outside bleach and tile cleaner. And now?" She looked at him. "Now I don't know. Winning. It doesn't silence people. It gives them permission to stop listening again." Gavin considered that. You think they're listening now? No, I think they're watching. It's not the same. He leaned on the railing beside her. Then make them listen. Do something they can't ignore. Naomi pulled her jacket tighter. What? Write a memoir, from mops to mastery? He smirked. I was thinking something quieter, something permanent. She raised an eyebrow. I want you to run the Youth Chess Initiative. Full-time, board position. Salary. Your own team. Her gaze hardened. This is another favor? No, it's repayment. For every game I lost to you that rewired my thinking. For every kid who saw you and realized they didn't have to disappear. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, I'll do it. One condition. Name it. No press, no banners, no photo ops. Just the work. He held out his hand. Deal. She shook it. They stood together in silence. Then she added softly, You know, I never played that final game for glory. He nodded. I know. I played it so some girl cleaning hotel floors could believe she had a move left. He swallowed. You didn't just play the game, Naomi. You rewrote it. She looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the edge of her mouth. Don't get poetic on me now. They walked again, steps quiet on the concrete, the city stretching wide around them. So, what now? She asked as they turned toward the train station. Now, Gavin said, you teach. And you? I learn. She laughed. The sound surprised them both. You're still terrible at closed positions, by the way. He grinned. Then I guess I need more practice. The gymnasium buzzed with the kind of anticipation that didn't need to be loud to be deafening. It was the final day of the citywide youth invitational, and Naomi stood near the stage, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer. The room was warm, too warm, and the overhead lights painted golden bars across the waxed floor. Rows of folding chairs were packed with parents, coaches, school officials, and volunteers holding clipboards and paper cups of coffee that had long gone cold. The South Side kids, her kids, were clustered near the front, medals dangling from their necks, beaming with the kind of joy that came not from perfection, but from proof that they belonged here. Tasha, a lanky 9-year-old with untied laces and a tendency to forget the night's movement, had made it to the top 5. That was enough for Naomi. More than enough. She hadn't come to win the whole thing. She'd come to shift something. And she had. Somewhere in the back of the room, Gavin stood, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. He didn't wave, didn't call attention to himself. He didn't have to. Naomi saw him anyway. The MC stepped up to the microphone, clearing his throat. And now, before we end today's ceremony, we'd like to recognize someone whose vision and dedication made all of this possible. Naomi's stomach twisted. No, not this. She hated the spotlight, hated how it burned too hot, too fast, too wide. But the MC was already continuing. Please welcome to the stage the woman behind the board, Coach Naomi Brooks. Applause erupted. Not the polite kind, but the kind that came from somewhere deeper. From the kids who'd once believed brilliance wasn't for them. From parents who'd watched their children bloom under someone who saw them fully. From volunteers who'd simply shown up to stack chairs and ended up staying for the vision. Naomi stepped onto the stage, her palms cold, her pulse a quiet roar in her ears. She adjusted the mic. It was too tall, and stared at the room, scanning the rows of faces. I didn't come here to be seen, she began, her voice low but steady. I came here because I thought, if I could help one kid believe they were more than what their school or their neighborhood or their past told them, then that would be enough. The room quieted further. But you've all shown me I was aiming too small. You don't just want to believe. You want to build. And you have. She paused, letting the silence breathe. There was a time not long ago when the only thing people noticed about me was the card I pushed. Not my name, not my mind, and certainly not my game. There were scattered nods, a few tears. But the beauty of chess, she said, is that even the smallest piece can change the entire board, if it's brave enough to cross it. There was a moment, a suspended beat, then thunderous applause. Naomi stepped back from the mic, bowed her head briefly, and walked off stage. She didn't head straight for the exit. Instead, she ducked behind the curtains, needing a breath, a pause, a space where the noise could settle into something she could carry. She didn't expect to find Gavin there, waiting beside a stack of plastic bins and a coffee thermos. "I figured you wouldn't want champagne," he said, offering her a cup. She took it, blowing gently on the lid. "You figured right." They sat on a stairwell backstage, the din of the ceremony muted behind heavy velvet. "You did it," he said after a moment. "We did it," she replied. "No, Naomi. You did." She smiled faintly. "You're really bad at letting people deflect credit." "I'm in recovery." They drank in silence for a while, the air between them no longer heavy, just full, like soil after rain. Then he asked, "What's next?" Naomi stared into her coffee. More kids, more boards, more mornings where someone doesn't think they can win, until they do. "And you?" She shrugged. "I keep showing up. Keep listening. Keep moving forward." Gavin nodded slowly. "I have something for you." She narrowed her eyes. "If it's another plaque with my face on it, I swear I'll throw it in the river." He laughed and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, flat box. Inside was a carved wooden chess queen, black walnut, its base engraved with 5 words. "Every move you made mattered." Naomi stared at it, her throat tightening. "I'm not used to keepsakes." "You should be," he said quietly. "You're someone worth remembering." She closed the box gently, the lid clicking shut like the end of a game. "Thank you." They stood together, not in a rush to part. Before they left the hallway, he asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "What?" "Sitting down at that board that first night. Taking the match." She shook her head. "I regret every day before that one when I convinced myself I didn't deserve to." Outside, the city had begun to shift into evening. The streets pulsed with life. Neon signs blinked to life. Music spilled from corner stores and passing cars. They walked a few blocks together in silence, turning onto a familiar path along the river. The breeze smelled like distant rain and possibility. "You know," Gavin said, "you didn't just win a tournament. You built something real." She looked at him. "It only works if it's not about me." He nodded. "Then let's keep it real." She glanced sideways at him. "How's the nonprofit board treating you?" "Like a science experiment," he said with a wry smile. "They don't get it, but they can't stop funding it. They want a public campaign, don't they?" He sighed. "Profiles, interviews, national media." She shook her head. "I'm tired of being a symbol, of being the one they point to so they can feel good about broken systems." "You're not a symbol, Naomi. You're an engine. You keep moving, the rest have to follow." She chuckled softly. "You and your metaphors." "I should have been a poet." "No, you'd be a rook. Straight lines. No nuance." "Ouch." They stopped near the cafe where they used to meet at dawn. It was closed now, but the window still held the ghost of their earliest mornings. "I got an invitation," Naomi said suddenly. "Citywide Youth League wants me to nominate a coach to lead Chicago's team for the regional qualifiers." "You going to?" "I already did." He blinked. "Who?" "You." Gavin laughed. "You nominated me? You're the only one who still loses to a 9-year-old and calls it a learning opportunity. I didn't ask for this." "No one does," she said. "But you keep showing up." They walked back toward the subway stop, the city warm around them, pulsing with light. Back in her apartment that night, Naomi placed the carved queen beside the plastic pawn on her shelf. 2 pieces, one a beginning, one a becoming. Neither would ever move again. But they'd already changed everything. The next morning started like any other. A buzz of alarms, 2 strong coffee, backpacks half-zipped, and kids darting through the nonprofit's hallway with the kind of energy only Saturday mornings seemed to conjure. The gymnasium smelled of waxed wood, lavender hand sanitizer, and faint echoes of laughter. Folding tables had already been set up in neat rows by the volunteers, each one topped with slightly mismatched chessboards, faded scorebooks, and colorful timers. Some kids still didn't know how to set. Naomi Brooks stood at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, scanning the room like a general preparing for battle. Her hair was pulled back, her sneakers clean, her voice steady. "All right, everyone," she called. "Pawns to the center. We start in 10. The ripple of excitement moved through the kids like a shared current. It had been 32 days since she'd won the Chicago Open. Not that she was counting. The trophy was boxed up, tucked somewhere in the nonprofit's storage closet beside an old humidifier that no longer worked and a stack of unused donor brochures. She didn't need it out. She didn't need it visible. The work reminded her of what she'd done, of what she was still doing. Naomi had officially stepped into her new role 2 weeks prior. Director, Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. A mouthful of a title, she'd joked, but one she wore like armor now. It came with a small office, a modest salary, and a mountain of expectations. She didn't care much for the first 2, but the third, that weight, she carried with reverence. "Coach Naomi," a small voice called from across the room. She turned to see Tasha, breathless, waving a worksheet in one hand and a banana in the other. "I beat Jamal in 4 moves yesterday." "Are you sure he wasn't asleep?" Tasha giggled. "I even did the back rank mate thing you showed us." Naomi grinned. "Then you're officially dangerous." She turned back to the main table, only to find Gavin standing quietly by the door, leaning against the frame like he'd always belonged in the background. He wasn't in a suit. He never was anymore. Khakis, rolled-up sleeves, and the same well-worn sneakers he claimed were retired boardroom shoes. He had become a regular presence. Never during lessons, never in the spotlight, but always after, books tucked under his arm, new boards balanced in both hands, snacks for the kids in a tote he insisted didn't make him look too dadcore. Most of the staff just referred to him as that tall donor guy who always loses to Coach Naomi. As the session ended and the kids filed out with a chaotic flourish of sneakers and backpacks, Naomi found Gavin near the coffee machine in the tiny staff kitchen. "You lurking again?" she asked, grabbing a chipped mug from the drying rack. "I prefer the term strategic monitoring." She smirked. "You just like watching them get better than you." "Guilty." He poured her a cup without asking. She took it like they'd done this 100 times. "How's the board treating you?" she asked. "Like a science experiment they forgot how to explain." She raised an eyebrow. "They want a public campaign," he added. "Profiles, video stories, national press. The Maya Brooks effect." Her smile faded. "And what do you think?" "I think, if you want to spend your life building kids instead of brands, you should." Naomi stared at her coffee. "I'm tired of being the example, the outlier they point to so they can keep broken systems in place. I'm not a miracle." "You're not a miracle," Gavin said softly. "You're momentum. You move, and the rest of us follow." She gave him a look. "That's dangerously close to poetic." "I'm evolving." She chuckled, then turned serious. "How are you really?" Gavin paused, then, "Different. Quieter. Maybe even better. The boardroom's not as loud. My decisions take longer. I second-guess myself. That's either wisdom or early-onset fatigue. Possibly both." He set down his cup. "Seriously, though, you've built something here. Not just with the kids. You built belief, structure, legacy. And you didn't make it about you." Naomi shrugged. "The minute it becomes about me, it stops being real." He nodded. "Then, let's keep it real." She glanced at the wall clock. "I've got a parent meeting in 10 minutes. He stepped back. "I'll head out. But, hey, before I forget," he reached into his satchel and handed her a flyer. "Citywide Youth Invitational. Big sponsors. Big visibility. I was asked to nominate a coach to lead the Chicago team." She narrowed her eyes. "Without asking me? You'd have said no." "Exactly." He smiled. "Now you get to say yes." She sighed, but didn't argue. As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Why do you still keep showing up?" He paused at the door, then looked back. "Because this," he said, sweeping a hand toward the gym, "is the best thing I've ever been lucky enough to stand beside." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that night, long after the kids had gone, Naomi walked through the gym alone. She found the plastic pawn she always left on the demo board, her ritual. She turned it in her fingers slowly, feeling the sun-warmed plastic cool against her palm. Then, carefully, she moved it to the 8th rank, the end of the board, the beginning of everything else. The next week, the city auditorium was packed. The ceiling tiles were stained at the edges, the chairs squeaked when parents shifted, and the lights above the stage flickered with the soft defiance of age. But the energy inside pulsed with something Naomi hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. Not the kind handed out in press kits or written in campaign scripts, but the kind that ripples through a room because someone earned it. She stood behind the curtain, straightening the name tag pinned to her blazer. Coach. And beneath that, Director, Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. The final round had ended, and the kids were still buzzing, comparing games, passing around cheap gold-colored medals like they were Olympic hardware. They hadn't taken the full prize, but one of her students, Tasha, had finished in the top 5. That was enough to turn the page. The MC's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Before we end today's ceremony, we'd like to honor the coach who brought these extraordinary students to life." Naomi tensed. No, not this again. But the spotlight had already shifted. Please join me in welcoming Naomi Brooks. Applause rose. Real applause. From the kids, from the parents, from the volunteers who had hauled tables at 7 a.m., from the janitors who'd peeked in during their shift changes, from the woman in the 3rd row who had once cried in Naomi's office after her son's 3rd suspension, and now smiled through tears as that same boy clutched his 4th-place certificate. Naomi walked onto the stage. The podium mic was too tall again. She adjusted it, heart steady this time. "I didn't come here to be seen," she began. "I came because I thought if I could help just one kid believe they were more than what their zip code or school record told them, then that would be enough." The room held its breath. "But you've all shown me something bigger. You don't just want to believe. You want to build. And you have." She paused. "There was a time when people only saw the cart I pushed. Not my name, not my mind, certainly not my game, but chess taught me something beautiful, that even the smallest piece can change the entire board if it's brave enough to cross it." Silence. Then thunder. Applause that came from the marrow. Naomi stepped back. She slipped behind the curtain and exhaled. Gavin was there again, leaning beside a stack of stage props holding 2 paper cups. "Champagne?" She shook her head, laughing. "Please, no." They sat again on the stairs, like they had after the Open. "You did it," he said. "We did it." "No," he said. "You did." She sipped quietly. "You're terrible at letting people share the credit." "I'm in recovery." They sat in companionable silence. "What's next?" he asked finally. Naomi looked down at her cup. More kids, more boards, more mornings where someone doesn't believe they can win, until they do. "And you?" "I'll keep showing up, keep listening, keep moving forward." Gavin nodded, then pulled out a small, flat box. Inside, a queen, carved from black walnut. She lifted it slowly. 5 words etched into the base. "Every move you made mattered." She stared at it for a long time. Then, "I'm not used to keepsakes." "You should be," he said. "You're someone worth remembering." Naomi smiled. Quiet, fierce. That night, back home, she placed the carved queen beside the pawn on her shelf. 2 pieces, one beginning, one becoming, and somewhere outside the city kept humming, indifferent, alive, just like her, because tomorrow, the real game would begin. Naomi's journey teaches us that true power doesn't always wear a title, sit behind a polished desk, or arrive with applause. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it pushes a mop, not a strategy. But when courage meets discipline and resilience meets purpose, even the most overlooked person can rewrite the rules of the game. Her story reminds us that talent doesn't need permission to exist. It needs opportunity. Naomi didn't ask for pity. She didn't demand attention. She simply showed up every day, even when the world told her she didn't belong. Through silent moves, drawn-out matches, and unseen labor, she built something permanent. Belief, not just in herself, but in those who saw themselves reflected in her. We learned from Naomi that success isn't measured by trophies or titles, but by impact. And legacy isn't built in spotlight moments. It's built in the quiet decisions to keep going when no one's watching. But perhaps the most important lesson is this. Being underestimated can be your greatest weapon, and choosing to rise without stepping on others is the boldest move of all. So, if you've ever felt invisible, unworthy, or too late to start, remember Naomi. Your next move could be the one that changes the whole board. Where are you watching this from? We'd love to know your city, your story, or even the move that changed your life. Drop it in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story that reminds us, greatness isn't always loud, but it's always real.